Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope that everyone is enjoying their weekend. So far, so good, hopefully. This is Bob Gums, and I'm bringing you the Concerned Forum. And we are taping at this time. Today is Thursday. And we are in the midst of the hearing, the January 6th hearing. And it's so, to me, it's so tragic and ironic to hear some of Trump's supporters and some of the whacked out things that they're saying. I remember originally it was all about, oh, well, it was Black Lives Matter and Antifa, especially Antifa, right? Because the crowd was like 99.01% Caucasian. So I guess the Black Lives Matter, that one didn't go over too well after a while. So they just said, well, yeah, we'll just blame it on Antifa, right? And unfortunately, as more and more things have come out about this this whole business, the president said this, did that, or what have you. And now it's like, oh, well, it really wasn't sedition. It really wasn't a takeover because it didn't work, right? The government was not overthrown. Trump was not able to continue to hold office as he wanted. So in their minds, now they're trying to say, okay, well, we were kind of wrong about Antifa, but we're not going to go into that anymore. Let's just say, hey, it didn't happen. There was no takeover of the government, and the voice of the American people, I think it's between 7 and 8 million of us, was heard. Well, what surprises me is that some of these people are lawyers. Not too many now. There are a hell of a lot less now than there were originally, okay? And I can see why. Because what somebody needs to remind these good folks is that plotting a crime is just as illegal as being successful with the crime. In other words, if me and my boys are plotting, we're going to rob this bank, and we say, well, yeah, come Friday evening at closing time, we're going to hit that bank on the corner of Broadway and 33rd Street, right? Something happens. The getaway driver develops a case of the flu all of a sudden. So the plot crumbles, the plot fails. Well, guess what? My crew and myself are still liable to do hard time because we were planning to commit a felony. So it's a bust either way. And see, that is the amazing thing about these, some of these right wingers. Like one guy's talking about, oh, well, at least they didn't try to burn down the city. Well, number one, I haven't heard of a city being burned down in quite some time. More like about 20, 30, oh goodness. When was the riots in Newark? Back in the 60s? So, no, nobody burned down any cities. However, there was damage done. That one in Milwaukee, where the law enforcement representatives decided to literally strangle the man on worldwide television, right? Now, let's get something straight. We're finding out more and more that you have, during Trump's tenure, you have had a network develop. I don't care what you call them, poor boys, white nationalists, Aryan supremacists. I don't give a crap, okay? But they have developed links within themselves. Some of them have gotten money, I believe, from certain Russian oligarchs and some real red, white, and blue rich bigots here in America. So you have a lot of that going on. And I think it was brought up on the news, about 4 days ago, if I'm not mistaken, within the last 4 to 7 days, that riot there in Wisconsin, I forgot the city, was it Milwaukee? Well, whatever, out there in Wisconsin. They're investigating now the fact that some of the whites who were out there demonstrating were actually Trumpists or Aryan nationalists, however you want to call them, and that they were the ones that were actually responsible for a lot of the physical damage that was done. I believe it was a drugstore was burned up. I don't know if it was, burnt beyond recognition, but it was definitely on fire. And I also know that some of the black folks in the out there demonstrating were questioning some of these white chaps, asking them, hey, why are you doing this damage? We're not out here for that. We're out here to protest the murder of an unarmed black man that was strangled in front of for the whole world to see. And that's why this kid who thinks that he's gotten off scot-free, the one that drove from another state and wound up killing 2 people and wounding a third, what was he up to? Because it's a very good possibility that he was one of the damage makers, and that he was not there to protect property, but he was actually out there to do what he did, which was to kill people who he felt were, progressives, who felt that it was wrong for the police to strangle this man on TV like that. So, be careful. And my caution to my fellow citizens who consider themselves to be nonpartisan and kind of in the middle, examine carefully everything that you've been hearing. Examine what MSNBC is saying. Examine what Fox is saying. Don't buy into this thing about, it's okay for the blacks to riot, but white people cannot show their anger and their discontent. That's a game being played on our, fellow white American citizens. See, because what happened on January 6th, that attacked all of us, regardless of color, religion, all right, nationality, ethnicity. That was an attack on all of us. It was an attack on our Constitution. It was an attack on me personally, because when I joined up, both times, several times, because every time you re-enlist, you take your oath. I I took an oath to defend the Constitution. And see, that's something that people don't understand about this whole thing with Vice President Pence, a former Vice President Pence, right? Now, I'm going to tell you something. I really don't care for Pence's views, his political views, right? I mean, as a human being, I can take him or leave him, just like anyone else. As far as his views in terms of a woman's right to choice, I mean, he's back from the Middle Ages somewhere. He's so far back, we can't even record it, okay? But I'm going to tell you something. And I believe myself to be a rational progressive, a rational liberal, a rational person for the most part. But I think that there are awards to be given right up there with Lynn Cheney. You got to put Pence. Pence has to go up there. And that man will always have my respect, quite frankly, and my gratitude. And I know that might be very hard for some of my associates and friends to hear coming from me, of all people, right? But listen, I believe when it comes to for the sake of our country and for the sake of truth itself, you have to play it right down the middle. There's no a little bit of this, a little bit of that, right? There's no screwing around with this. There's no screwing around with the Constitution. There's no screwing around with something that men and women from the time that this country started literally gave their lives for. I mean, I really wonder sometimes, these elections, right? Especially these two coming up, I think that the media, they have it wrong. I think a lot of us have it wrong. This isn't about, how many votes one party or the other happen to get on a particular election. This isn't politics we're talking about here. This is about our country. This is about what men and women took an oath to defend and, if necessary, to die for. And you don't play around with that. And I would say that if the person was a Republican, if the person was far to the left, which sometimes I have been accused of being, doesn't make a difference. The truth is the truth. And perhaps one of the few lessons I absorbed from my parents growing up was that you don't lie. You do not lie. And, my old man, he was what you would call really old school. And to him, a man's word was everything. And what do you say? Only cowards lie, right? And I tell you, I never ran from a fight. I have tried to avoid fights going through life, but I never ran away from one. Never run from a fight, which is to say, especially before I got a little, fairly nice with my hands, I used to get my butt kicked a lot, a great deal. So I know about those schoolyard scuffles. But I never ran, and I never lied. Even I swear to God, my first wife's my first wife's mom, And her and I, we definitely had some run-ins. But she used to tell her, she said, one thing about Robert, we scrap all the time, but that boy does not lie. And she's right. And that's one thing I pride myself in. Because when you really sit down and think about it, a human being really doesn't have anything else. When the time comes and the Creator calls us home to wherever that is, what they say is true. You can't take it with you, number one. Number two, you're going to be remembered. Some people will remember you fondly, with good memories, and some people will say, oh, well, he was an asshole, blah, blah, blah. Which is fine, because we all going to have our turn, right? But your word, who you are as a person, that's it. That's what that's what it's going to be about. And I do believe, because folks that know me know I am not a religious person per se, but I do have a certain sense of spirituality. And I do believe, I don't know how it works out, but I do believe that we answer for the things that we do and for the things that we don't do. And I think that a lot of those people, they're going to have to answer. I believe they're going to answer both in the here and now and when that time comes. And see, that's one of the things that I have always found detestable about Trump and his dad, when his dad was alive. They were liars. And I keep writing, and I keep saying to people, why the hell do you think when he wanted to make his big foray into American politics, you notice that he might have made his announcement coming down that escalator here in New York. But his main thing was, I don't like to use that term heartland, okay? But Trump, when he started out, his main thing was down south. In other words, he never ran, he could have ran for mayor. As a matter of fact, to tell you the truth, if I didn't know Trump as well as I do, I would ask the question, how come he never ran for mayor of New York? Because being mayor of New York, hell, that fits his bill to the T. Because if you notice, most mayors of New York, if you study the history of this city, especially as we go into the 20th century, they were characters. That was their whole thing. They had a certain persona. And that's what basically helped to get them elected. And I don't understand, here we are now going in, the 21st century. Trump was a known face on television right here in New York. Why didn't he run for mayor? He could have ran for mayor, he could have ran for senator, could have ran for governor. But no, he chose to run for the presidency of the United States. And he chose to do that without the aid of New York. Let's face it, when you're playing in the big leagues like that, one of the best things you could have going for you is coming out of New York. The people who didn't like him didn't really care for him personally, most of them, but the whole financial, money, banking, real estate world here in New York, they knew him. He was part of that elite club. But he chose to spread his juice down south. The reason being, in my opinion, everything focused with him on the South because, well, okay, he and his family, they had all the money and everything like that, making it out of here, New York. But in terms of the juice, no, that wasn't going to happen. It's just like that little creep in Florida, the governor of Florida, right? He snuck in here. He snuck into town. When was it, last week or the week? I think it was last week. He snuck into town here in New York because, you know, those Republicans, especially those Southern ones, they are really something. They will talk about the Northeastern liberal establishment. Yeah, they're a bunch of college-educated elite snobs and blah, blah, blah. But when they need money for their campaigns, where do they travel? They don't travel to Memphis. They don't travel to Mississippi. They don't travel to Birmingham, Alabama, or Miami, Florida, for that matter. They all come to New York. That should tell you something else, but we'll save that for another time. But see, that's the whole thing with Trump. He couldn't get elected dog catcher. As a matter of fact, all things being fair, if I was running against Trump for mayor of New York, I would have a better chance of winning and beating his butt. Why? Because people know him to be a crook. They know him to be a liar. They know him to be untrustworthy. You got court records, you know, people who are part of the clique, so to speak, here in New York circles that know this guy. And that's why I say he could never succeed in anything politically. But see, folks down south and in the so-called heartland, they don't know a damn thing about New York per se, right? And after they started hearing, well, gee, Donald, he hates the same people that I hate. Once that link was made, that was it, right? They didn't want to hear anything else. So even if you had pictures of Donald Trump at a barbecue out in the Hamptons roasting little children, it wouldn't make any difference to those poor fools. They wouldn't care. Well, he hates them Hispanic immigrants, so he's all right with me. And see, that's a huge problem with politics here in America. Not what the person running or the folks running, not their ideas, their program, it's about who they hate. Now, it's just like that thing in Georgia, right? You have one black man, very fine, upstanding minister, right? Very intelligent, knows the issues. And then you have this other black guy that was selected by Donald Trump because of his name. I don't like to get into names. I know this because a lot of times what happens, people get so hung up on the names that they forget the actions of the person in question. But in this case, I'll go ahead and I'll say, talk about Herschel Walker. Now, with the Republicans, some of them, they have gotten a little slick over the years, right? And they're like, well, hey, we know we're racist. The world knows we're basically racist as a political party. Ever since the 60s and late 60s and 70s, we've gone out of our way to attract people who don't like people of color and who don't think that people of color should be able to share in the American dream like their families have been able to do. So what we'll do, we'll find people of color that will play ball with us, see? You have a couple of folks running for Congress who happen to be either Latino or they happen to be Black American, see? And this is the Republicans' way of saying, see, we're not really racist after all. You know, it's a game. It's like a Trojan horse. And with Herschel Walker, that's about the biggest horse that they could find, right? Now, a lot of people of color, we still have a little hangover from the late 60s, early 70s. What happened then? Well, that is when you really started seeing Black folks especially, first time since Reconstruction of the 1870s, 1860s, make the foray into American politics. And so it was almost like, well, yeah, naturally, I'm going to vote for the brother, or I'm going to vote for the sister. But see, something else happened in the 70s that I remember. It's a musical thing. I forgot. Undisputed Truth. I think that was the name of the group. But they came out with it was a hit too. Something to the effect, every brother ain't a brother, every sister ain't a sister. And believe it or not, that held true then, and it is doubly true now. And as a Black man, as a Black American, do I feel happy or am I pleased that you have a Black man, a former athlete, right, running for the United States Senate from a southern state? Yeah. And that person that I'm feeling proud about is the Reverend, not Herschel Walker, right? To tell you the truth, as far as this whole, the whole Black thing is concerned with the Republican Party, as a Black American, I'm insulted, quite frankly. I'm insulted because in most cases, it seems the Republican Party cannot simply, well, yeah, this guy is qualified. When I say qualified, what I mean by qualified is he knows what the hell he's talking about. He knows what the issues are. That's all, nothing else. You don't need a PhD to run for public office, even if it's the presidency. But common sense would require that you know what the hell is going on. And Herschel Walker has proven that he doesn't know jack. And in that regard, I feel, quite frankly, that's an insult. Because you're telling me, you're showing me, you want a blackface up there so that you can possibly dilute the Democratic vote for the Reverend. And I don't know, if people have a hard time seeing that, well, that's unfortunate. But putting Herschel Walker in the United States Senate would be like putting a jackass at a Tea Party, okay? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful of Herschel Walker, but I feel that I have been disrespected as a Black American and as someone that risked his life for his country like so many other folks have. You don't do me like that, Republican Party. You don't have a right to do us like this. I see them trying to pull the same stunt with the Latino community. And since on my dad's side, they're from the Caribbean and they're Spanish-speaking people, I would have to say that that also offends me. Because the base, unfortunately, of the Republican Party, there are a great many people there who they can't think unless it's along racist terms. And I really don't think that a lot of people, especially in the Latino community, I don't think they realize the depth of hatred that exists in the base of the Republican Party. These are the type of people, Trump runs around talking about, oh, they never came out to vote before. It's not so much that they never came out to vote before, but what it is, they knew that their way of thinking, that their way of talking would have been considered an embarrassment to the Republican Party. And so to a point, I guess maybe they didn't feel welcome. It's just like if it's, some people might have a problem with gas. And so they don't like to go out to banquets and stuff like that. And that's the same thing with the Republican base. Am I saying that all base Republican voters are hateful bigots? No, I'm not saying that. Am I saying that they are all screaming racist? No, I'm not saying that either. But what I am saying is that being a racist, being a hateful bigot, will not disqualify you from being in the Republican Party. Being a member of the Poor Boys or the Proud, whatever the hell they call themselves, and the Oath Keepers and crap like that, that will not stop you from having a prominent role in your local Republican Party. And therein lies the problem. I noticed when I was especially when I was in Jacksonville, I was stationed there for a few years, and it was one of the worst experiences that I had in my entire military career. And I mean, I couldn't believe the stuff that I heard. Now, of course, my size, my temperament, no one called me the N-word to my face, right? But what they did, every denigrating, filthy thing that sick minds could think of to call Jewish people, that was heard in the office that I worked in. At that time, I was the operations yeoman, and it was bad. It was rough. And then what they had to say about Latinos, oh my God, I couldn't believe this. And what wound up happening, I made a complaint. I started making complaints about it, and they caused some problems. A few times, blows were pretty close to being thrown. I know at one time it was a little guy from Arkansas, white officer. He became a Lieutenant JG while I was still in the unit. It was a fighter squadron. And he saw what was going on. And this guy was from Arkansas. And he saw what was going on. And it was sad, man. It was truly sad. Because I was like basically fighting the whole world by myself. And eventually what wound up happening, they got the new CEO, or I should say the new XO, he got rid of these, the most grievous of these folks. And that was good. That was good for the squadron. But everything you can think of, the K word, kike, wetback, bean picker, the supervisor of our department was this young Hispanic gentleman. He was a E6, waiting to make chief. And he would come in the morning, hi everyone. And, the senior chief there, enlisted guy, he was like, hey, good morning, bean picker. And I would, what? And one day, I pulled my man to the side and I said, hey, how can you put up with this crap? And the brother was a good dude, and I guess in his way, he was a very strong person. But the first chance that he got out of that. He got out of that unit. But, I say all this just to say that this is not the Republican Party of my parents, okay? And see, these were the people that I ran across there in North Florida. These are the people that run the Republican Party's apparatus in the various states now, see? At that time, they were, what do you want to call them? Embryonic racial terrorists. Now, they are, state chairman, working on the state level, precinct captains, that sort of thing. And see, that is what makes up the Republican Party. They're based for the most part. Why do you think you have seen so many Republicans? They've either left the party or they will say, well, I'm not an active Republican, and let it go with that. That's why Colin Powell, that's why he bailed on the Republican Party, because he saw where this thing was headed for. And I wish the decent Republicans, and when I say decent, I'm talking about those who do not want to throw bombs, okay? Who do not work 24 hours a day on how to basically screw over people of color. Those type of Republicans, what they need to do, they need to speak out. But again, some of them are literally afraid to speak out. Not just for their safety, but for the safety of their families. And I mean, come on, people. You've heard the stories. They're not stories. They're real. The FBI and Homeland Security will tell you the greatest domestic terrorist threat that we have are these right-wing Aryan nationalist types. And those folks who are still in the Republican Party, they need to take a lesson from Lynn Cheney and from former Vice President Pence. Now, like I said, someday, we pray, this whole mess will be put on the shelf, and we'll move on to the next issue, right? However, if we don't stand up and deal with these issues, we're not going to get to the point where we'll be able to put this thing on the shelf. Because these folks, and when I say these folks, though, I'm not just talking about your basic loudmouth racists. You have some very wealthy people involved in this crap. A lot of this stuff is financed by some very wealthy people. And we have to really learn how, as a nation, how we are going to deal with this. You know, and I understand that people, well, what about their freedom of speech and all? Listen, number one, the Constitution, it's not a suicidal love pact, all right? Just like a person has the right to defend themselves, same thing with a nation. That's why you take that oath to support and defend the Constitution. Not President Biden, not President Trump, not President Joe Schmuckatelli. President doesn't make a difference. He doesn't count. What counts is the Constitution. And, you know, just the hypocrisy from the right wing and from the Republican Party. You went crazy with Colin Kaepernick when he took the knee. All this man was saying here at this arena for this national sport, football, because I want everybody to see black people are being killed by law enforcement, and these killings are not justifiable. So in the name of God, in the name of your God, please stop killing us when there's no reason for it. Underneath this flag that we both honor. And for him doing that, well, you see what they did to his life. That's why when Americans run around overseas, China, we don't like what you're doing with human rights. You too, Cuba. You too, Venezuela. And now the world looks at us and they laugh openly now and say, well, who the hell is the United States to talk about human rights? Your law enforcement people strangled a nonviolent man for the whole world to see. And see, this is, you know, people who are prone to watch Fox, I don't think that this is what they don't get it, okay? London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, Dublin, Ireland, Sydney, Australia, New Zealand. When they strangled that boy on TV, and that damn cop, you know, with that little shit-eating smile as my man is gasping out his last life's breath, calling his mother's name. The whole world saw that. Now, I would say to my white American brothers and sisters who happen to, you know, vote Republican, I would say to them, maybe it doesn't make any difference to you that the whole world believes you to be racist. And violent racist is at that. Because believe me, they do. But you also have to stop and think about it. What does that do to America's place in the world? And the Republicans especially, you have too many people in that party that think that, oh, well, all America has to do, we could just shut ourselves off from the rest of the world and do our own thing, right? No, you can't. Unless you can plant your own in your little vegetable garden, unless you can plant and, you know, grow your own food, right? Go in your backyard and pump your own oil and then set up your own little refinery so that you can turn it into gasoline And you don't have to worry because you're going to have your own little dome so that the weather and the climate will not affect you at all unless you can do all of that. You don't live by yourself on this planet, right? And when one of them asteroids decides that, well, I'm going to slam the living crap out of planet Earth today, that's not just slamming someplace in Eastern Africa or someplace in Western Europe. That's the planet that's going to get whacked. So this idea about some kind of isolationist is insane because the world does not work like that, unfortunately for you. And when you decided, or when your forefathers, I should say, decided that they were going to upset the apple cart and say, well, listen, we don't like what Great Britain is doing. We don't like how they're trying to rule us. What did you do? Remember the Declaration of Independence? Right? And what does this, one of the things that it says in there, a decent respect to the opinion of mankind. Well, today we would say, instead of mankind, many would have us say humanity or humankind, etc. But you get the basic idea. A decent respect to the opinion of mankind requires that you call out, hey, folks, this is the reason why we're doing this. This is the reason why we are making all this noise in the world. This is the reason why people have to die. This is the reason why we're trying to get loans from the Dutch and from the Spanish and from the French. This is why. A decent respect to the opinion of mankind requires that we tell the reasons, what's causing us, what impels us to get on this course of separation. So don't tell me that, oh, well, I don't care what the French have to say about our racial problems there. You know, it doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it does mean something. It means a hell of a lot. It means a hell of a lot. What do you think helped to kick off the modern civil rights movement in the first place? It was the fact that when we were trying to get on Hitler, this is before we even got in the damn war, when we were trying to get on Hitler's case about mistreatment of people in Germany because of their religion, Hitler was throwing it back in our face. Ah, well, you talk about how we're treating Jews and gypsies and blah, blah, blah. Well, how about the way that you treat your own black citizens? And then after we got in the war, Hitler would always rag America. Once again, you dare to criticize the Nazi people. How could you? Your prisoners of war, my soldiers, when they're captured and taken to America, why is it that the black officers, not just the enlisted men, but the black officers, the lieutenants, the captains, they are not good enough to sit down and eat with my men who are now your prisoners? As a matter of fact, I should thank you for treating my men from my army who are now your prisoners, and you treat them better than you treat your own black officers. He made a point one time, a black man who happens to be able to have become somehow a major in your army, or even a colonel, cannot sit down at a table where two German prisoners of war on the train heading out west, where most of the prison camps were, out west and down south, right? So everybody had to ride the train. That used to be a big thing once upon a time in this country. Taking a long train ride and being able to sleep in the Pullman car and have breakfast on the train and everything like that. Black soldiers and sailors couldn't do that. They had to stay in the colored section. And that's the point that Hitler is making. If a black man was a professor, or if he was a general or a major, and yeah, you had a couple of the black generals during that time, and also you had black PhDs working for the government at that time. They could not, however, sit at a table in the dining car with the white German army prisoners. Now you think about that. These people, the enemy of your country, that's why they're riding on that train, heading out to, or heading down to one of those prison camps in Alabama. They could sit down and have a nice meal in the dining car. You, black lieutenant, a black officer, in charge of the prison escort detail, you had to wait outside the dining car. You weren't allowed to eat with the white folks, even if those white folks were enemies, sworn enemies of your country. They could sit down and eat and have a nice meal, and you weren't allowed to, because the dining cars were white only. And Hitler would throw that in our face all the time. Same thing at the end of the war, right? We start the Cold War with Russia. Stalin said the same thing. Oh my God, they used to throw that in America's face all the time during the Korean War, when the Russians were working with the North Koreans. And some of our pilots, by this time Air Force pilots, who were black, would get shot down. And when they were interrogating them, when the communists were interrogating these guys, after they had been shot down and captured, the interrogators would say, well, Lieutenant, you've been shot down. Now we have you. How do you feel about being shot down and now you're in a prisoner of war camp for a country that maybe the nicest thing they've ever said to you is nigger? How do you feel about that? Oh, man, that is what gave speed and impetus. I can tell you definitely that's what really pushed the decision, the big one, 1954, right? When they supposedly ended segregation in the schools and everything, right? And see, people need to think about that, because that is what I'll put it this way, that is what a good amount of these modern Republicans, that's what they would like to do. And yes, I know it was the Republicans that basically got us the civil rights bills of 64 and 65. Yes, I know this, right? That was part of that was the reason why we were able to get that thing passed. People like Everett Dirksen, people like my buddy down here, Javits, Senator Jacob Javits, right? Yeah, it was the Republicans that knocked down the wall of discrimination and what have you, of public discrimination. But that was 64, 65, not now. This Republican Party is intent upon taking us back. That's why a Latino, a black, a Jew, I'll never figure that one out. Why you think that, I could see them being independent, but being part of that Republican machine, I think that that is frightening. And I think that it is sad because the base of the Republican Party has nothing, no kind words to say about any of you. If you're Latino, if you're a Jew, if you are black, you're garbage as far as they're concerned. Oh, of course, you might be one of their special pets, like a Clarence Thomas, for example. But this Republican Party of now, this ain't your dad's Republican Party. Trust me. I know. And remember, this is also the same Republican Party that during the height of COVID said that people over 50, remember the Lieutenant Governor of Texas talking about people over 50 should be willing to die? You know, believe me, this is not your dad's Republican Party. And as my time grows short, I just want you all to make sure that you pay attention to these hearings. Because all these people that are talking about what happened on January 6th and before the planning that went into it, these are not Democrats. These are not progressives. These are Republicans. And in more than half of the cases, these are people that Trump himself selected, right? All the time. He went to court over 60 times in front of Democrats, independents, Republicans, MAGA Republicans. And all these people told him the same thing. No one stole any election from Donald Trump. Donald Trump lost the election. But he finds that he could use this business about, I was robbed. He feels that he can use this as a scheme to basically keep himself in power. And now we find out, even more importantly, we find out more importantly that this has become an excellent way for him to grift, for him to make money. He has been making millions off of these poor, working class white folks primarily. They have a hard enough time trying to pay their rent. And that shows you the kind of person that Trump and his inner crew of thugs, this is the type of people that they are. Because most of these people in the Republican base are not wealthy people. Yet here we got Trump, not from any point of principle, but because it's a damn good hustle for him, squeezing money out of people that can least afford it. And I think that that's pathetic. I think that in itself is criminal. Folks, pay attention. Stay woke. And I love to use that word, because the word just means be aware. Don't let a right-wing Republican basically reconstruct the English language, all right? Stay woke and pay attention, all right? Whether you stay woke or whether you stay awake, either way, all right? Keep an eye on what's going on. And I guess that's the main thing that we can do right now. and discover the truth. What's it say in the Bible? I think it's the Bible. The truth shall set you free. That might be the story of America 2022. Let the truth set us free. Okay, listen. Lovely talking to you. Catch you next week, same time, same place, same channel. Go ahead, enjoy your weekend. Be good to each other. See you next time. Bye.